Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to a very special episode of Albion Online with your host, Black Boa here. Another way you can check prices potentially when looking to sell to the black market to decide if it's a good price. A lot of times you can just click on an item and scroll to the bottom and it has an estimated market value. Although this is not a perfect science because it changes depending on where you are, what the closest market is to you, it does help give you a ballpark estimate of maybe where this is selling across the game. So let's go look here. If we want to sell this mage robe, it says that it's worth about 16,000 to sell it elsewhere, or just in general. There we go. That's pretty much a fine price to sell it. That's where you could sell it at other markets too. In fact, this is just slightly higher, so we just sell immediately here. And we kind of do the same thing with everything else. If you want a ballpark, that's 867. Here we get 727. For purposes of understanding how this works too, you can put a sell order in. It will charge you some silver though, so it may not be worth it after the fact. But if we wanted to put a sell order in, we probably just want to go like -1 like we do at a normal market, and now it's listed. It'll eventually sell when the black market decides that it needs to pay that price to get that loot table fulfilled. 699 here. This we can instantly sell for over 1,000, so this is definitely a good idea. Here we have 1,500. How much can we sell it here? Yeah, here we can sell it for 2,000, so this is again a better deal. As I said, it's only armor and weapons, so you can't sell this stuff. And that's how you kind of quickly check if you can make money on the black market. After checking out the black market here, we just mentioned earlier that we reached the expert adventurer level. And as you can see here, it enables enlistment in faction warfare. So for us, and this is really a personal decision, you would probably make more money as a solo player initially if you joined one of the other factions outside of Caerleon. You could join Thetford, Marlock, Bridgewatch, Lyndhurst, or Fort Sterling. You'd probably make more money there for a number of reasons, but eventually you might be able to make more money here. The reason I say more money in the outside areas is because Caerleon is a ruthless faction. You are hostile against a number of different people, including your own faction. You also don't have your own faction chat to coordinate other types of content with. And so this is definitely a more hardcore faction. However, for the guild that I will eventually create, we are going to be big into PvP, and we're going to be Caerleon faction PvP flag. So I'm doing it here because this character will be used that way. If you want to make more money, it's probably better for you to do a different faction than this. However, let's do it. Enlist. Should I want to enlist? Yes. So on top of this, there's something else you need to know. In order to get the full benefit of, faction points that you will be earning, you need to have at least 700 item power. Currently our item power is 500. So what we're going to have to do is go to the Caerleon marketplace and buy some T4 gear. That should bring us above the 700. So that's number one. At this point, you're going to want to upgrade your gear. And number two, essentially, this is how this will end up working. As you make faction points by doing PvE, by doing gathering, by capturing outposts, by killing other faction players, you will gain faction points. And so let's talk about a couple of things with factions because it'll help us determine how to make the most money possible. You want to open the faction interface. Control F is the key for it. And now that we are part of the faction here, Caerleon, we see that we have daily rewards for reaching 5,000 faction points earned. And we also have a monthly campaign reward similar to the Adventurers Challenge, where as we earn faction points, we can unlock these chests, which give us more and more silver. So consider faction warfare the Royal Continent equivalent, because you can only do this in the blue, yellow, or red zones. This is the Royal Continent equivalent of, let's say, the Conqueror's Challenge, right? So whereas the Conqueror's Challenge only rewards you for lethal, and it has its own little progression system here, the faction warfare system rewards you for doing Royal Land content while being flagged as your faction. This first tab gives you a bonus. You can see how much you can earn. The next tab gives you a general overview of how all the factions are doing this particular campaign. As you can see, the campaign ends in 15 days, but this isn't really that relevant. And as you can see, if you're doing Caerleon, our job is not to win a season. Caerleon's job, the Bandit faction as we are called, is to stop these people, all of them, from like making progress. We're the spoiler faction. We basically want to like cause trouble to everybody else, usually in the form of PvP, to stop them from doing as well as they're doing. So just understand that's why we don't see Caerleon. Last but not least, you have the final tab, which shows you your standing within the factions. Just so you know, as you rank up, you're going to start earning bonus points for that. This is a very long, like getting 6 million faction points to be upgraded here is super, super long. It's incredibly long. But as you go up, even in the smaller ranks, you will end up getting bonus faction points. Now, as you spend faction points, you do not lose your rank. Don't worry about that. You do not lose rank for spending faction points. This is literally the currency that will appear right here that you can then spend at the faction vendor. Before I show you what you can buy at the vendor, however, I just want to mention a couple more things. If you change a faction, you're totally fine to do that. However, you will lose ranking in the faction you were at previously. If you only change once, it'll bring you down a little bit, but if you then change again to another faction, you'll probably be starting very close to a hired hand or whatever the initial faction recruit is, you know, the initial starting point. So that's also important to know. To reiterate why Caerleon is very difficult, other factions get their own faction chat, and other factions are allied with members of their faction. Caerleon does not get a faction chat, and unless you're in a group with another Caerleon player, you can kill them, they can kill you. It's a very ruthless faction, but it's going to be fun because it'll bring a lot of good memories in the near future here. So what do you do when you earn the faction points? Where do you spend it? I'm also going to flag here, and I'll explain this in a minute, but generally speaking, if you want to make money via factions, you click on the second tab, and based on your rank, different items become available to you, including unique mounts that are unique to the faction, Iron Campaign chests, which give you some silver and some Tomes of Insight to level up your gear, crests, and hearts. Now, certain people will want to buy the Iron Campaign chest because they want silver and EXP. I don't recommend doing that. If you want money, just buy hearts. Literally buy as much as you can of these, and if you have a little bit left over, you could buy some crests, and then immediately either sell them on the marketplace, or you could decide to process them further, because these hearts and these crests are actually required for faction cape crafting. If you are a crafter and you want to make that extra little bit of money, then this would be a good idea to do. Process it further into a faction cape. Alright, so you've enlisted in whatever faction you chose. Here we chose Caerleon, as I mentioned. The way that you can start earning faction points is you must be flagged. You have to flag up for your faction in order to start earning points for the faction. Now, if you look at our name here, Black Bow RPG, watch what happens when I flag. Look at this. We suddenly have a little symbol there that shows what my rank is. Currently that shows I'm a hired hand. So now you know you're flagged. Another reason why you know you're flagged is if you look up here, your avatar to the top left also has a red skull here. Now you are only flagged to enemies of your opposing faction, even people within your own faction, but let's say you choose a faction outside of this, you are only hostile to enemy factions. So don't think that anyone can start attacking you because you flagged as a faction. No, only other factions that are not your faction, excluding Caerleon, which can kill their own members. When you faction flag, a few other things also pop up. A new opportunity pops up here called trade missions. If you want to look, let's say, at the Thetford contract, come in 3 different sizes. This goes for all of them. They come in 3 different sizes. And basically what it says is, I want to take on this contract. I will deliver a certain amount of hearts, and if I successfully return and deliver that contract to the place without dying during it, I will then earn a reward for that. So if I wanted to engage in a minor contract Vinehard right now, number 1, I would need 3 Shadow Hearts. Another reason to buy these always. So it'll cost me 3 Shadow Hearts to use. This then would show a symbol above my head that indicates that I'm transporting hearts. And if I actually successfully do it, the reward says you get 6 Vinehearts, right? Yeah, there you go. The reward would be doubling the amount of Vinehearts I invested. So it cost me 3. If I do it successfully, I get 6 back, which means a 3 heart profit there. And as you can see, one heart right now is probably around between 40 to 50,000. Yeah, here we go. One heart to sell in Caerleon will be 40,000 silver. So you can make some good money by transporting these as well. Note that Caerleon is by far the riskiest place to do these transports, simply because they have to go through red zones. Other factions do not have to go through red zones in order to transport their contracts, unless of course they're doing a contract to Caerleon. But most of them will not be doing that. So you can literally be safe in a blue and yellow zone just following those zones to the drop-off location. The drop-off location is shown on your map, so you know exactly where it's at. That's what you would either do. You would either spend faction points, sell them immediately to make a profit on the market, process them further to make faction capes, and then sell them to make a profit on the market, or transporting these contracts, making more of those hearts as your reward, and then selling those on the market, or double the amount you got there. So it's up to you if you want to do that. That's how the rewards work here. Alright, so as I mentioned, for us here on the West server, I wanted to increase my gear to at least flat T4. You can forego your bag and cape to go higher unless you want to do it, but a cautionary tale here. Currently, with day 2 of the new server in Asia starting, the prices for T4 gear is actually really, really high. We are buying the T4 gear on the West because the market is stabilized. By the 5th day, when the free-to-play players in Asia start, I hope that the market in Asia will be cheaper so that you can do what I just did and upgrade your gear at a reasonable price. If not, then continue to use your T3 gear as long as possible. Just keep it cheap. Use it as long as possible until prices stabilize, and then you can go out and do what you have to do. Now, Caerleon apparently still allows me to earn faction points even when I'm not at the 700 item power level. I'm pretty sure that would also be allowed in the other factions. You may just not earn as much as you would if you hit the 700 mark. So you just faction flag for the first time. You're leaving whatever faction city that you enlisted in. Most people will just begin gathering and killing some mobs. So let's do that to show you how the faction points are earned. It will go like this. And as you can see, did we not earn any faction points either? Let me check. No, I didn't. Okay, we need to get to the 700 level, I guess. Otherwise, we can't. This is what you do. If you're just barely under, you're going to go and increase the quality of your gear to get you to that level. Let's go do that. So before we will be trying to increase the quality of our gear to get to the 700 number, we just noticed that we have a T3 cape. Let's see what happens if we buy a T4 cape. Will that bring us to the promised land? And in this case, you may want to be a little choosy, right? You could actually pick a higher quality. This is still about the same price for a decent quality of cape. Let's buy it. Go like that. Okay, there we go. That's all we needed. We needed just a T4 cape here. I'm still going to show you what to do if, even with a T4 cape, you are not able to get above the 700 threshold. There is a system in Albion that allows you to re-roll the quality of an item. You do that at the repair stations. And even though I don't need to do that, I'm going to do it just to show you what I mean. You just go to the final tab here, and we have a lot of quality that is just bare minimum, so we can just take one. Our current item power is 763. If we re-roll, we've got it to this level. And if we equip it now, it just went to 738. So if you did this for a couple of items, you can get a few item power gains here or there. Just another way to do it in case you're trying to get at least 700 item power. Reroll the quality and it should be fine. Yep, there we go. So as you just saw, we are now able to earn faction points because we have over 700 item power. What you can do to earn faction points is threefold. You can do PvE, you could do gathering, or you could do PvP related activities. The PvE related activities relate to these outposts. And the goal of the Bandit faction, as I mentioned, is to be in a position to kind of disrupt what the main factions are doing elsewhere. So if these outposts are currently bandits, which they are, that means that our faction, people like me, ended up going here and making them bandit faction. These were probably owned by some other faction previously. As an example of this, if you turn on your faction overlay, you could see that our Caerleon faction has this much of the world occupied, whereas the other factions are much, much further ahead. And what we're supposed to do as a Caerleon is we can either decide to go and capture outposts, so that they have to recapture them back to make faction points, or we can just go around trying to, fight other factions and earn faction points that way. The best way to earn faction points, though, is definitely outpost captures. And for those of you who will choose a faction outside of Caerleon, which is definitely the play for a newer player, choosing a faction out of Caerleon, you guys will make so much faction points on the outpost captures because you'll be able to group up with your faction. It's easy to find where a fight is. You just open the map, filter based on the faction, and then if you want to know where a fight's happening in a safe area, you could see things like this. You see that there's some flags here that have the cross swords. That is showing that there's some sort of faction activity happening there. And you would basically just follow them around, capture the outposts, and kill players if you can. That'll reward you a bunch of different faction points, from faction points per outpost captured to faction points per player kill, to a large bonus that happens when you capture a region, when you turn a region from one faction to another. And then there's also a defense bonus. Anytime there's any activity against another faction, there is a defense bonus that is granted, and it is significant. We're talking about in the thousands of faction points in one shot. Now, I will mention that not everyone will want to use a nature staff, so if there's anyone who watches this video and they're wondering what other weapons would be good to start out with, let me just give you a couple of basic nuggets of information. The damage of a particular build is based on the chess piece. The chess piece is the thing that has the passive physical attack bonuses and magical attack bonuses, as well as the physical ability bonuses and magical ability bonuses. So your chess piece determines that. If you're wearing cloth, you deal very high damage, but you're very weak. Leather is the best of both worlds. You get a little bit of defense, and then you also get a little bit of offense. That's typically reserved for melee bruiser types. Cloth is typically reserved for casters. And last but not least, you have plate armor, which is the most tanky, but the least damage that is applied to your abilities. In some cases, literally no damage bonus for plate. Keeping this in mind, you can devise a build that can be good for fame farming. Some weapons that many people are recommending include the axe line. The axes and the battle axe specifically are extremely strong in these scenarios. You can go the one-hand spear. You can do swords. The dual sword is good for the PvE side. You can do certain mage weapons. The arcane staves are very good. And I would stick to something in that range. But really, the key you need to know is if you want to deal more damage, even if it's a weapon that typically doesn't wear cloth, cloth is the way to be. And when you're farming mobs, it's pretty important to kill them quickly. So yeah, feel free to use a different weapon, but by far the best PvE weapon in the game, in my estimation, is the nature staves. Not necessarily this one in particular, but any nature staff. Choose wisely. Oh, so okay, here's a perfect example. You see this? This is another faction player right here. He is hostile to me. He's not flagged up, he is hostile. And hence, this reminds me of another very important mechanic in the red zone specifically. To remind you again, faction content is only royal content and activity. So one of the key things here, as we can see in this zone, if we look at the bottom of this zone, I told you earlier that if you're in a red zone, you could see how many hostiles are in the zone. Here it said 0, but why was that guy hostile? Well, this is a very key point about factions. You need to be careful. Faction hostile players do not show up in this hostile counter. Only players that have manually flagged up as hostile are shown there. So those players are not faction players, but they're still players that can kill you. So understand what that particular number down there is covering. It does not include faction players, so there could be much more hostile people in a zone than you would ever know just by looking at that little hostile count at the bottom. So be very careful. Faction players do not count as hostiles. Here's an example of an individual doing a faction transport. When you see that little dice rolling around their head, that means that they're currently in the middle of a transport. If you kill them, you get the transported items, or at least a portion thereof, and you would be able to hopefully... Oh shit. Okay, see, that's a Caerleon faction gang squad on the next side of this area. As you can see, they're hostile to me as well. So be very careful of that. But we did see, indeed, a transporter trying to make money that way. Oh, there's another faction enemy. Okay, here's a good example of what just happened there. Do you see that exclamation point? There is an individual down there who is hostile. He's another hostile player. A good way to realize somebody is nearby is when you dismount. If you see a red exclamation point like we just saw a moment ago, that means that somebody is within, I believe, 30 or 40 meters of you. And if you dismount within 30 or 40 meters of someone, you cannot use your skills for 5 seconds. Now, it's important to know that because it could save your life in multiple ways. Let's say you're minding your own business. Suddenly, a hostile player comes into your purview. If he dismounts right next to you within that 30 or 40 meter range, he automatically cannot use his skills for 5 seconds. This allows you time to mount up and start running away. So don't panic when you see someone dismount right on top of you. If you're capable of getting on your horse at that particular moment, that would be the best thing to do. Otherwise, you could sprint away for a moment and then try to mount up a little bit further away. The reason why you might want to sprint versus mounting up immediately is if you are in the middle of a fight, the mobs will cancel your mount up. So you don't want to be caught in that position. But just understand there is 5 seconds before someone can attack you in that scenario, as well as 5 seconds before you can attack someone else if you're the one who's dropping on them. Another thing is to mention about factions, what is the value of certain zones? It's really important to understand that. So if we were to open up our map here, we are going to notice that this zone has a maximum of 3 stars that it could be, and the stars begin to accrue based on the time that the zone has not been captured for. So in this example, we see that it's only at 1 star, but it's about to transition to a 2 star. And all you really need to know about these stars and these values is the more stars there is, the more faction points it will award the person who captures the area. So it'll just be a lot more bonus caption points if it's a high value area. Just know that, and perhaps that might determine which areas you want to fight in. Once again, another potential downside of the Caerleon faction is that it doesn't participate in a buff that the other factions get when you are further away from the faction city. As we can see here, we only have our mounted buff, our health regen buff, and the buff that tells us we are locked to the Thetford Black Zone. If you were faction flagged with, let's say, Thetford, and you are as far as we are, pretty far out from Thetford, right? Thetford's over here. You would be getting a buff showing up that would increase the fame as well as the loot that you are getting for doing any activity in the area. So pretty much if you're farming mobs like I am, you would be getting more fame and more loot. Again, only a very few people may want to select Caerleon as their first faction. You will probably do much better to earn your first premium by joining another faction initially. I only am joining the Caerleon faction because, again, I have specific goals with this faction. Now, you will notice over time that your reputation is increasing. This is a good time to talk about reputation and how to manage it. Reputation, if high enough, will give you a passive defense bonus. Now, I'm looking to see if it's on my screen right now, and I do not currently see it. However, this might be because I'm faction flagged. I'm not sure if the bonus is only available for non-faction flagged players. But if you are someone who, would rather skip out on the faction flag but still grind these mobs, your reputation will give you a buff. Alternatively, one way to see where your rep is and what the consequences and benefits are is by opening up your stat panel and clicking on the reputation here. The biggest penalty for being a bad boy in the Royal Continent is that you will not be able to enter blue zones up until a certain point. And then if you get well below 20,000 or below, you can't even enter red, yellow, or blue. If you hit negative 20,000 and you're still alive, you can still walk freely in some areas. But generally speaking, once you hit negative 20, you can only go to the black zone. So if you are going to be doing PvP activities and hard flagging in the Royal Continent, just be cognizant that you never want to go below 20,000. Now, the question is, okay, well, if I want to manage my reputation, how do I do that? How do I get it up? That's what she said. Well, there is a passive gain for reputation change for however low you are. So reputation change here, as you can see, it says 0 a day. However, if I was negative rep, it would be a certain amount of rep that I would gain passively every day. But by far, the best way to gain rep is killing mobs like we're doing right now. They give you a decent amount of reputation every time you kill them. As you can see, plus 15 rep, plus 28 faction points. All of these things add up to lowering your reputation from right before you hit the 20k. Now, if you go dreaded or below, and again, I'm going to make an exception for, let's say you go dreaded or below and you're still alive, that individual can still grind to get below 20k. However, let's say you're below 20k rep and you died, the only way you can get your rep down is through the passive rep system. So if you go on a bender with a large group and just start slaying multiple people in the red zones, you could potentially be banished from the Royal Continent for days days, if not weeks, depending on how severe it is. So if you want to be in the Royal Continent, then you want to manage your reputation. Now, you can still enter towns, by the way. You can still enter the towns. So if you have islands in a town, you can go there. It's no big deal regarding the towns. But in terms of like the ability to go to safer zones to do content with that character, yeah, you can't enter those zones. It's only the BZ for you, pal. Now, here's another thing. If you're out and about and you're noticing a big blob like this out here, you need to anticipate where they're going to go. After they do this, they're obviously going here. So you want to leave this area because they are going to be going up there very soon. Again, map awareness is key, especially when dealing with factions, because you technically can see a large blob on the map. The blobs on the map have at least 11 people in a very concentrated area. That is how the blob occurs. You have 11 or more people, you start to blob on the map, and it just increases from there. In some maps, there are interesting triangular areas that have a unique type of mob known as specters. These specters drop unique loot that can be used to craft artifacts, potentially be re-rolled into runes as well, runes, relic, and soul. And so if you're a new player, specifically on the Asia server, these items will likely be pretty expensive at the start. So if you find yourself here, feel free to farm these mobs, and if you get the drops on them, they might be really good. So yeah, there you go. Arcane Essences, if we were to check, like this one's worth 4,000, this one's worth only 600. But on the Asia server, these would be worth much more. So feel free to find these across the map. I'm pretty sure you could see it on the world map as well. Let me double check. Yes. They look like this. They're called Sepulchres of Magic, and they're typically found in red zones or black zones. So after we've been out doing our faction activities for a while, we would have earned some faction points. As you see here, we've earned 3,000. Just to illustrate what I would do once again if you want the most money, simply go to the vendor, press on his second tab for faction items, and buy hearts with whatever points you have left. And what I'm going to do from here is literally go and sell it on the marketplace. And let's just see, it says 40,000 estimated price. Is that correct? Kind of, yes. So 42 to 40. This is honestly so close that I don't mind insta selling it for 38. And bam, for just doing what you were doing anyways, we just made another 38,000 through factions. It's that simple. Grind while faction flagged, especially if you're in the Royal Continent, because that's the only place you can do it. And so if you're in the Royal Continent, be faction flagged, do what you're doing, accordingly, and you're going to make a lot of money. One thing to know about Caerleon is that if you wish to fast travel to any other city from Caerleon, or if you wish to go from a city to Caerleon, the only way you can do so is when you have 0 items equipped. You cannot bring any luggage, which is a pretty big bummer, but this is done because of the black market and how the game rewards riskier plays. So it's specific to people who are doing caravans to sell the black market as their money-making opportunity, and they have to go through a red zone to do that, and they may get ganked accordingly. So that's the mechanisms there. What we're going to show you now is if you did decide to start with the gathering and crafting side of the equation, let's go back to the starting cross city and begin our journey on the gathering and crafting side. So I did teleport myself to the city of Thetford, and I plan to move to the starter town shortly. I just want to make a note of what I'm about to do here. I personally had made enough silver where I want to invest in some sort of mount for gathering before I actually go and start gathering. If you decide to start gathering right from the start, you won't have that option. The reason being is we ended up grinding silver, and you may not have made enough silver or the option to purchase a ox. This is especially true in the Asia server. So if you couldn't afford to do what I'm about to do on either the Asia server or in your current playthrough, simply just walk from Caerleon over to the other area. It is going to be scary because you can get killed by full loot PvP, but I would recommend, possibly making your way there manually if you have no other option. I'm just telling you how you can do it. Now, also, you may not have gone to Caerleon like I did. You can decide not to go there if you don't want to. So that's another thing to understand, that it's your choice what faction you want. I simply went to Caerleon because I want the Caerleon faction. You could literally live in any of the other cities and it would be perfectly fine, perfectly safe, and likely more profitable. Here is the introduction to the gathering side of Albion Online. When you start fresh on a new server, like you will be in Asia, or if you're starting new on the West server, you really have to understand what you want to gather, what you want to craft. For us, we already know what we wanted to craft because we had our build and we explained earlier exactly how we made the silver we made so far. But the most important thing to understand is if you know your build, you may also know what you want to gather. So Nature Staff is my main build. We have fine cloth and wood planks. So this would mean I'd need to gather fiber and lumber if I wanted to craft this item and also gather the materials needed for it at the same time. I personally wish to do that, and I personally wish to only focus on those two. I am not going to gather anything else until perhaps a later date, but my goal for this character is be able to gain pine planks and fine cloth, craft nature staffs, as well as perhaps craft my cloth armors. Now, I would definitely choose 2 gathering skills initially at most. The reason I say this is because it will take a while to level these up, and these become extremely valuable when you are higher up in tier. So as you're able to gather T6, T7, T8 resources, that's when things get really lucrative. And so if you're trying to do all of them at once, it will take you a lot longer. And as we mentioned in a previous guide, because gathering is among the most grindy parts of this game, everyone should be saving their learning points if they plan on gathering to increase their gathering specializations to the next tier. So this is the journeyman level. I need to gather some cotton here, get to this point, then I can use my learning points. This is where I would use my learning point. So it's both the cotton harvesting tool, which is the sickle, and I'm going to do the same as well in the lumberjack. And that way, I'll just keep saving my learning points to continue going up in tier, and that'll cut down my time to get to the good stuff much sooner than someone who doesn't use learning points to progress their gathering. A quick note about mounts. There's approximately 3 types of mounts in the game. You have transport mounts, which are not included as part of your inventory when you leave the mount circle. To illustrate this, let's move out of the transport axis circle, and you now see that I went from 4% weight to 30% weight. These transport vehicles, these transport mounts, will absolutely have higher carrying capacity, but they are very risky to use in a red or a black zone. Because let's say you get dismounted and you're carrying a ton of items, you will ultimately not be able to move due to over encumbrance. So these particular mounts for gathering are great in the blue and yellow zones, and so I would recommend using them there. The second type of mount that I'd like to share with you is the traveling mount, the mount that's a little bit quicker than an ox. It generally has less carrying capacity. There are a lot of different types of these, but overall, the benefit of using them, even if it's less capacity, is that their carrying capacity, even after you leave the mount circle, counts as your carrying capacity overall. So just remember, transport mount equals doesn't count if I'm out of the circle. I won't be able to carry everything I carry once I leave the mount circle. And the traveling mounts, you will be able to carry everything you're currently carrying once you leave the circle, but you just won't have as high of carrying capacity. The third and final mount group that you really don't need to know too much about right this second is the battle mounts. These are used in large-scale warfare, but we don't need to touch on that because it will be a long time before you see that action. So as we mentioned, we were trying to get ourselves to the next tier of resources, and we just so happened to reach the learning point stages. We're currently at the T2 level. We want to go to the journeyman level. And what did I say to use? Learning points on gathering. Got 100 learning points available up here. Might as well click learn. Now we're T3. Same thing here. And that's as simple as that. The next time you're going to use learning points is when you reach this bar over here to get to the T4 level. Simple as that. Now that we got our tools to the journeyman level T3, we still have our T tools in our inventory. It's up to you if you want to keep gathering with T2 tools, but it would be much quicker, much more XP, much just quicker chopping things down if you simply go to the local marketplace and purchase a set of tools. Now, for those in Asia, Asia, the population would have been there for 5 days with the Head Start packages. So by the time you come in, I don't think tools will be all that expensive, especially at the T3 level. But if you can afford those tools, or you can begin to craft them yourself. But the problem with that is they take both wood and metal and wood and ore, and that's not one of those things that we personally are gathering. You can go ahead and gather ore and that and make a living off of tools if that's how you would like to make your money, but for me personally that's not an option. So I'm going to buy it from the market, upgrade my tools so I can quickly do what I want to do. So now that you've acquired your T3 tools, just keep gathering until your mount is full. Hopefully you have an ox. Keep gathering until you're full, and then we're going to make it back into the starter town. So the next time you'll see us is in the starter town. Good luck, grind away, and we'll see you shortly. So hi again, I kind of lied. You're going to see me before the crafting town. However, I just want to talk about these mobs right here. These mobs, this particular mob, Swamp Spirit, is a unique mob because it allows you to gather the actual resources that it has on top of it much faster than a regular resource node. These are known as elemental mobs, and hence as you start gathering them, the speed is much faster than it would be if I was gathering a regular node. A really good place to go gathering when you start reaching T4, T5, T6 is the Roads of Avalon. And this is specifically because they have a number of those elemental type mobs that you can kill and then quickly gather their resources with the increased gathering rate. So if you are interested in the Roads of Avalon, and you've heard that before, it is a great place for gatherers. It also is a good place for people who want to do some fame farming and opening of certain treasures that you may find out there. I personally don't do it too often, which is why I will not go deep into the Roads of Avalon, but I'm just giving you an example of another piece of content that you may choose to do to either increase your gathering much quicker or to find other riches and make money. So as I mentioned earlier, if you want to have any health regeneration food without paying for it, one of the best ways to do so is with a fishing rod. You can go to any body of water. When you see that there is some sort of fish and a circular motion of the waves, that means it's a little bit of a hot spot. In order to fish, you just click on the left click button and you hold it down to cast it. In this case, I did not need to do it. And then to reel it in, you just want to keep the bobber in the middle away from the yellow and red. Little by little, it will actually increase. So we just caught our first fish. This so happens to be a common rudd, and it, even though it's only 30%, might as well use it, right? Better than nothing. So utilize fishing early so that you can have some health regeneration food. Especially in Asia, the food market's going to take a while to materialize, so you could bet that the food prices will be rather high initially. So use fishing to supplement and you'll save a lot of money. Alright, so you crafted until your tools broke and you're nearly full with your ox or whatever mount you've chosen. It's now time to go back to the starter cross area. For us, it is Thetford Cross. And it's time for us to actually do something with all the materials we got. So as you know from the tutorial, you have to actually refine materials before they can actually be crafted. And we're only doing 2 types of mats, which is the lumber and the cotton. We're going to just press that button right there. If you remember, the starting town is great for crafting and refining and all these different activities because the stations do not charge you with any fees to use. There is no silver cost. However, when you begin to go to the cities of the Royal Continent, you will notice that a lot of the vendors out there are owned, if not all of them, owned by players, and they will charge you silver based on their price that they wish. So understand, it's great to stay here until you get your crafting to T4 or whatever you thought you were going to craft. You won't be able to craft T4 here, but your crafting can be leveled to T4 craftable by spending time here and leveling it up. So what we're doing though here is, again, we're just working on the things we want to be able to craft. For us, it's the nature staff initially. Also, I know I can craft my these pieces of armor too because I'm gathering cloth. So if we want to do our nature staff, it's part of the Journeyman Hunter Lodge. If we want to do our holy staff, it's part of the Mage Tower. Let's start with our Hunter's Lodge here. And what we see here is the ability to use these items, but because they're grayed out, that means that I am not able to craft them yet. So what we're going to do initially to increase our crafting is craft these bows. I'm going to pick 2 of them. And what I want to show you as well is this third little tab here called Study. If you know you are not going to sell these bows, what you would want to do is utilize them, study them, so you can gain much more crafting fame and get to the next tier quicker. As you can see, by placing these bows here, they're going to disappear, but they're going to yield me 275% crafting fame. So it's like I crafted them like more than double. So that's a beautiful thing right there. Let's just click study.
Let's get to work.
There we go. That's all we needed to get to the journeyman level of crafting. This is where we split into more of a focused approach to crafting, as you can see, but we've unlocked a good portion of this right now. So I unlocked Hunter Lodge. I did not unlock the Mage Tower. It's unfortunately, until we get to the tier 3 level here, I don't actually have the resources, but here's a little trick. Remember that studying thing here? Well, we happen to be in a starter town where likely there's a lot of T2 stuff being sold at the local marketplace. We are going to buy already crafted items, and we're going to study them to get to the next tier. So let's use what we just learned. In order to unlock my Holy Staff, we need to use the Fire Staff. We're going to buy 4 of them. And as you can see, they're only 110 silver each. It'll probably be a little bit more expensive if you're doing this in Asia, but either way, you should be able to afford it by now. So here we go. Let's go and study what we can study, and we should be able to unlock that. I'm not going to be using these ever again, so study them all. There we go. Mage Tower is now unlocked. If you do plan on crafting the Warrior's Forge, then you just need to do exactly what I did. In fact, if we just want to unlock it just for the sake of unlocking it, let's just buy a very cheap couple of swords here. Oh, okay, actually, this is good in the middle of this that I show you this. We were able to carry everything because we were within our transport mount circle. We move fine now, but at the moment, and we have 71% capacity. The moment we leave this circle, though, you got to be careful. We move real slow. We're way overburdened, 500%. So that is why I say only use these mounts in blue and yellow areas. The moment you're in a red or a black, doing that is going to be 100% death for you if somebody knocked you off your mount. So be very careful. And this actually may be a good idea to do in Asia, and here's why. If you're suddenly seeing certain items that are selling for a lot on the black market, it's nice to maybe just feed some T3 stuff there that's easy to get and easy to do. You can see that this has been a very quick leveling process here, so you never know. It might be good just to unlock all crafting to T3 since it's so easy to do for each of these Hunter Lodges. You just buy a cheap sword, study it, bam, easy. So, as I said though, we want to focus on our crafting of the nature staffs specifically. There is a precise amount in order to get you to the learning point stage, but we're not going to use learning points on crafting, but we're going to craft these and we are going to end up studying every single one of them. So I'm going to just craft 5 with the resources that we gathered, and I want to study that and see where it takes us. And then I'm going to ballpark again. Alright, that brought us to this level. So 5 of those plus studying gave us 5,000 fame. I think we need another 5 to 7. I'm going to do 9. I think 9 might be it. We'll craft another 9 and let's see how much it's going to pour us here. Oh no, not yet. Alright, I think we craft 1 more. There we go. Just so you know about the studying too, anything below, like once you get to the T4 crafting, anything below cannot be studied. However, you can study anything as much as you want T4 and above. The studying will not stop you, but just so you know, the moment you go above T2, you can no longer study T2. The moment you go above T3, you can no longer study T3. T4 and up, however, you can study to your heart's content. So as you can see, after crafting the T3 items and studying them, we got to the T4 craftable level. As I mentioned, at this point you will no longer be able to craft T4 or above in this starter town. You were never able to in the first place, but you'd have to go over to Thetford or whatever the closest city is to you to begin to craft T4 and above. And most of you will be using the public crafting stations. Just make sure that you check the prices to find the best one for you to begin crafting T4 and above in these cities. So the only thing that we wanted to craft that we were not able to craft and get to T4 crafting was our holy staves. And so what we would want to do is go back out there, gather a bunch of wood and cloth, and then we would be able to finish that. But I'm showing you here that for all you who would rather start with the gathering and crafting side to make money, this is how you do it. You level up for free here, and then eventually you begin to craft things to either list on these marketplaces, either the new player marketplace at the cross, or better, you can go to the center city and try to craft T4 and above and begin to sell them. But perhaps the biggest way to make money here, especially for the Asia server, is doing your research with the black market. Figure out exactly what items are going to be selling for more than your traditional markets would be. And in this case, you would be comparing Caerleon to black market as well as Thetford, since that's where you're going to be coming from. But let's say you find an item the black market is willing to pay more for than is normally the case on a regular market. You may wish to go through and risk the red zone transports, try to transport everything through the red zones and sell to the black market. On the Asia server specifically, this is big money right now. If you're willing to do it as a crafter right now, the big money is going to come from you making this trip and selling to the black market. Friendly reminder, if you are comparing prices between different markets and you want to get to Caerleon, remember you can only travel there naked without any luggage. So make sure that you leave from the city of Thetford, go to the travel planner here, travel naked for free here, and then check the prices accordingly. So the Bandit Faction event is a random event, so to speak, but it does happen generally every 3 to 6 hours, 3 to 5 hours, 3 to 6 hours. It's random when it pops, but generally, if the last one happened 3 hours ago, you should start expecting potentially another one to pop within the next couple hours. And so the Bandit event basically means the Caerleon faction takes over every single outpost in the red zones at the start of the event, and the mission of all the other factions is head into the red zone and stop the bandits. You know, basically go and capture the outposts in the name of your faction. While everyone is taking over these bandit factions in the red zone, they may also be running into other factions who are trying to cap outposts in the same area. This is where large-scale PvP happens in the red zone, where large amounts of players fight each other to get the right to cap the outpost. Again, this is only in red zones. It only happens every 3 to 6 hours. It's an hour long, and it gives you bonus faction points as the reward for participating. So you get bonus faction points just by default because the outposts are in the red zone, so it's going to be more than blue and yellow. That's one way you make more points. The other way you make more points is right at the end of the Bandit event. It actually scores the top factions in the order in which they win, first, second, third, and then the rest of the factions aren't really mentioned. But even if you are not in the top 3, you gain a bonus pool of faction points, a big chunk of faction points just for participating in the Bandit event itself. So that's as best as I can describe it, I suppose. Only people who are faction flagged will get a notification that a Bandit event is beginning. If you are not faction flagged, the only other way to tell would be to look at the top of your map here, and if you don't see like a countdown clock here, that means that the bandits is not happening. That's the only way to check. Now, you can also, of course, join a faction Discord. The best way to know every single time is people have created Discords outside of the game, of course, to pretty much tell people when the event happens so that they can all group up together and fight. So you finished your stay in the Cross area. Don't worry, you'll be returning here every now and then. The game of Albion Online still requires lower tier resources when refining in order to be able to craft materials and be able to craft gear. So there's always a need for lower tier resources. It depends if you want to do that yourself and gather those, or if you've made enough money, perhaps you buy the lower tier on the marketplace and only focus on gathering the higher impact and more lucrative resources. Once you're done here as well with all of your crafting, we got our crafting to T4. We are going to take one last look in here and make sure we grab all of our belongings, because we are going to leave here a little bit. Now, Do we want to sell these mules before we go? I'd say yes, because we were supposed to do that right off of the boat, and I'm sorry, I guess I forgot to do that. But when you are out of the tutorial, make sure you sell your mules on the marketplace here. Alright, so now you are ready to go as a crafter. You pretty much have to continue to grind for a very long time. You're going to relocate to whatever city is going to be your little home for a while, because that's where you're going to be crafting. For us on this character, we can just say for now it's going to be Thetford. And we're just going to bring and transport all of our stuff over there so that we have the lower tier resources ready for higher tier crafting. Well, there you have it. This has been our guide on how to make money on the Asia server. We went over some key things that you can do, from going out and attacking open world mobs to doing faction content while faction flagged or faction point gain. And finally, we showed you a good way in the early game for gatherers and crafters to level up their skills and potentially consider transporting their goods to Caerleon. Now, of course, this is a sandbox. You can take my advice or you won't. It doesn't matter to me. You choose whatever you like to do. But the choice is yours in a sandbox game, and whatever you choose, I hope this guide helps you make a decision. If you wanted to ask me what I would do personally out of everything that I showed you today, I would 100% be going into the Mists of Avalon, the lethal Mists of Avalon, filling out my Conqueror's Challenge, and earning a bunch of favor. With that favor, I'd be going to the Energy Manipulator, buying Conqueror's Challenge chests, and enjoying all the silver pouches that come from that particular avenue of wealth. That's my personal favorite thing to do. The Mists also have 13 member caps in terms of the amount of players that can be in there. If you're free to play on the Asia server on the 20th, you are going to see dozens and hundreds of people on top of you trying to do the same thing. If you get to the Mists early enough, you can be out of the hair of all these people and making all the silver you desire. So again, thank you so much. I hope all of this has been a wonderful experience for you. I hope you've enjoyed it, and stay tuned for more educational content on the Black Boa Nation YouTube. We'll catch you live on Twitch as well, and thank you so much.